Two friends kidnap a rich woman to become rich, but one of them is hiding a secret that can ruin everything. We'll find out what happens next in today's German thriller, Kidnapping Stella. Make sure to leave a like and also subscribe to the channel. Now, let's get on with the video. The film starts in a car park where Tom and his partner Vic are trying to steal a van. They take the van to a scrapyard and put some fake number plates on it. After this, they visit a hardware store where they buy ropes, mats, and all kinds of other stuff. They take all of this to their apartment and start putting together a soundproof room that looks like a prison cell. They board the windows, put extra locks on the door, and even assemble a new bed. They also go to the woods and dig a hole under a marked tree. The next day, they leave their house and wait on the side of the road. As soon as a girl comes into view, they put on their masks and grab her from behind. They put her in the van and take her phone. After removing the SIM card, they drive back to their apartment. They take the girl into the room that they prepared and tie her to the bed. Her name is Stella, and she's screaming for help. After tying her up, they remove her clothes and take pictures of her face next to that day's newspaper. After this, they put some new clothes on her before leaving the room. They get outside and change into their uniform. Then they enter the room and start asking the girl her father's email address and phone number. She is in shock and Vic has to slap her to get her out of it. She slowly gives them the information they need and they leave her alone again. Vic notices that Tom looks nervous, but Tom says he's okay. Their next job is to mail the photos to Stella's father and Vic goes out to do so. Tom, on the other hand, has to check on Stella every 10 minutes to make sure she's safe. Vic returns with some prepaid phones and says that it's time to give some water to Stella. So they go into her room and Vic explains to her that she needs to cooperate with them to stay alive. She tries calling for help, but the building is empty, so she concentrates and drinks water. They also tell her to signal when she needs to use the bathroom, and Stella has to pee, so they help her out. After they leave, Stella just lies there crying. That evening, they are having dinner when Tom says he isn't hungry. Vic wants him to eat and even forces food into his mouth. He then tells Tom that he isn't feeling hungry because he's having second thoughts about what they are doing. They have both been in prison before and Tom is worried they'll get caught, but Vic tells him to follow the plan. When Vic leaves again that night, Tom goes into Stella's room and tries to touch her, but she asks to use the toilet. She has to take a dump and he frees most of her body and provides her with a bucket. He then stands in the corner with a gun in his hand. Stella tells him that she can't relieve herself with him watching her, but Tom doesn't want to take his eyes off of her. But when Stella insists, Tom turns his back towards her. Stella uses this opportunity to hit Tom in the head with the bucket. She takes his gun and demands to be freed. Tom is trying to grab the gun, but Stella fires a shot. She also manages to take off Tom's mask. She is shocked to find out that her kidnapper is actually her ex-boyfriend. She doesn't know why Tom would do this, but he blames her for ruining his life. Stella tries to tell Tom something important, but he tackles her and quickly ties her back to the bed. He tells her that if Vic finds out about their relationship, he will eliminate her immediately. After this, Tom leaves the room to think about his options. This is when he hears Vic outside. Tom lets Vic in, and he tells Tom how Stella's dad is hesitant to pay the ransom. He asks Tom to sleep a little, and even puts his jacket on his friend. The next day, Vic asks Tom to wake up because they are starting Plan B. They are getting ready to record a video of Stella losing her finger. Stella is obviously horrified and she pleads to her father to pay the ransom as she is 4 months pregnant. Vic is about to amputate her, but Tom stops him. So they leave the room and Vic checks the video. He thinks that it will convince Stella's father to pay. That afternoon, they are about to feed Stella when Tom forgets to wear his mask and Vic has to remind him. They go in and Vic tries to feed Stella some soup while Tom stands at the door. Stella is resisting and Vic is having a hard time, but Tom is focused on the bullet casing that's on the floor. Stella has seen it too, and they know that if Vic sees it, all hell will break loose. Tom goes to grab it, but Vic asks him to stand back. He is giving Stella some water when he drops the spoon on the ground. Tom quickly grabs the spoon along with the casing. Vic finds it strange as he grabs the spoon, but Tom takes the casing outside. He then goes to the toilet to flush it, but the casing just won't flush. He's flushing it again and again, and Vic gets suspicious. He is about to break into the toilet, so Tom has no option but to swallow the bullet shell. Vic is confused about this behavior and thinks that Tom is just nervous. He tells Tom to calm down and to keep an eye on Stella because he has to send the video. When he leaves, Tom checks the calendar and something isn't right because he was dating Stella 4 months ago. He asks Stella if she is really carrying his child, and she asks him to touch her belly to feel it. Tom does so but doesn't feel a thing. He asks her why she didn't visit him in jail. Stella says she didn't want her child to grow up with a father who is often in prison for petty crimes. She asks him why did he choose to kidnap her. Tom says that he met Vic in prison and they made plans for kidnapping. Tom was mad at Stella for abandoning him in prison. He also knew that Stella was the only child of an extremely rich industrialist, so he gave her name to Vic as payback. She tells him that he won't get away with it even with all the money in the world. She asks him to think about his unborn child, but Tom thinks that Stella is lying. So she tells him to check her reports on her phone. Tom quickly goes to grab her phone, but before he puts in the battery, he realizes that if he turns it on, the police will track her phone. So he goes to get rid of it, but Stella starts choking. Tom quickly goes back and removes her handcuffs. She pukes and Tom wipes her face. This is when they start making out, but Stella uses this to put handcuffs on Tom. While he's tied to the bed, Stella tries to find a way to escape that place. Tom, on the other hand, is trying to grab the keys. It is impossible to escape without those keys, so Stella grabs one of the burner phones and calls the cops. However, the police are unable to track that phone and Stella does not know where she is. She knows that she needs the keys to escape. She tries to get them, but Tom kicks her in the head after getting his hand free. He checks her, and she's just passed out. He transfers her to the bed and leaves the room. When Vic returns, Tom is cleaning the puke from the rags. Vic gives Tom the good news that Stella's father is ready to pay 4 million euros immediately. He is over the moon and plans to settle in Mexico. He even invites Tom to accompany him. After this, Tom goes out to get the van ready. This is when he finds Stella's pregnancy reports which prove all her claims. While Tom is processing this news, Vic is getting Stella ready. Suddenly, the burner phone falls from her pocket. Vic checks it to find out that she called the cops. He asks her how she got the phone, and Stella accidentally lets Tom's name slip. Vic is trying to think why his partner would betray him when he finds the bullet lodged into the soundproofing on the wall. He takes out his knife and asks Stella to tell the truth. She is scared and tells him everything, including how she is Tom's ex-girlfriend. Vic is beyond mad and knocks her out. When Tom comes back, Vic asks him if he has been honest. Tom says that he would never lie to his friend. Vic is disappointed, but he hides his feelings. They quickly administer anesthesia to Stella's shoulder and then drive her to an abandoned boat shed. They tie her up there and get ready to grab the money. Tom doesn't want to leave there, but Vic says that they will come back for her. They drive to the woods and go to the marked tree. Vic asks Tom to grab the money from the pit and Tom hesitantly agrees. He goes to the pit, but there is no money. This is when Vic tells him that the money was transferred somewhere else. He tells Tom that he knows about everything. He asks Tom to kneel and he is ready to shoot his friend. Tom tells him that he is thankful for the way Vic protected him in prison. After this, he tackles Vic and runs into the woods. Vic shoots at him many times and finally hits Tom in the back. However, Tom manages to get away from there, so Vic leaves that place in his van. He goes to the city and grabs all the cash. He even changes his vehicle in the scrapyard. Tom, on the other hand, somehow makes it out of the forest. That evening, Vic goes to the boat shed to finish off Stella. He tells her that he has no choice as he fills up the syringe with poison. He assures her that it won't hurt, but before he injects her, Tom gets there and hits him in the head. Vic quickly grabs his gun and gets back on his feet. He tells Tom that he is the reason why his girlfriend and child are going to die. Tom tries to stop him, but Vic shoots him. While Tom is on the ground, Vic goes to finish him off, but Stella trips him. He loses his gun and Tom grabs it before shooting Vic in his heart. Tom is at death's door, but Stella asks him to grab Vic's keys, and Tom slowly gets them. Stella uses the keys to free herself, and she checks on Tom. He looks at her with some satisfaction before dying. Stella is heartbroken, and she gets into Vic's car. She's crying, but that's when she notices the money. The film ends with Stella laughing as she drives away with millions of euros.